Well, Trump appoints an actual white supremacist who is proud of his white supremacy, and he gets grilled by, well, the Senate for his white supremacist views. Here it is.
Tell me how you define white identity and what you think is being erased about white identity.
Certain types of Anglo-derived culture that comes from our history.
Like what?
Let me think about this. Senator, I would say if you were to look at the book by one of your former Senate colleagues, Born Fighting, about the sort of Scotch-Irish military culture and certain, pride that went with that, that would be one example. Obviously, you could have sub-elements of that culture. You could have Italians, you could have Irish, and those are in many ways more distinct.
But you're worried about white culture. You're not worried about, you're now retreating to ethnic identity. You don't speak about ethnic identity. You speak about white identity. So tell me the values that stitch together white identity and that make it different than black identity.
I would say that the white church is very different than the black church in terms of its tone and style on average. Foodways could often be different.
And those
music could be different.
And those are being erased.
This man talking about swag and cuisine. There's actually more. I'm laughing because none of these white supremacists, even the ones that seem well put together and can actually articulate a sentence or two, they're not smart. He had to say, well, let me think about this. Sir, your whole life is based on the doctrine of white supremacy. The question isn't difficult. I would imagine, sir, you're not making white supremacists proud right now. Damn it. Now that's a simple ass question for any bigot in the United States of America to be able to answer, sir. And I'm sure they're disappointed in your continued performance. Here it is.
A year ago, were white Americans the most discriminated against group in the United States? You said it. So
yeah. Senator, no, certainly this is my belief. I'm not running away from that. I think that while, of course, all races in different contexts can be subject to really severe discrimination, that when we look at our legal structures, white Americans are often very disfavored in overt ways. We're seeing this in the Small Business Administration, many other places.
So your belief is that white Americans face more discrimination, at least prior to the Trump administration fixing this, than black Americans?
On average, Senator, yes, that's correct, and I'm not running away from that statement at all.
Oh, man. It's just a statement, though. There's no facts to support it. As a matter of fact, the facts go against the statement based on analytical data, objective and subjective reviews, as well as statistical data. He's incorrect. Now, he has been appointed by Donald Trump to serve in a high-level position with the State Department. The State Department deals international diplomacy is the game for the State Department. White people make up 5% of the global population. So if you're working for the State Department, you are working with 95% of folk who are black and brown. It may not be a good idea to appoint somebody to a position in the State Department who has to work with a demographic he actively is opposed to. Now, it unravels because the guy cannot defend his argument that white Americans are facing a cultural genocide. Here it is.
One of the things you said was American whites are victims of a cultural genocide. Where to start? So you'd agree with me, wouldn't you, that whites are pretty well represented in the United States Senate?
They are well represented in this body, yes, Senator.
And how about in the House of Representatives?
Senator Kaine, I don't have those particular numbers. However,
but you would agree that they're pretty well represented in the House of Representatives.
Senator, I would, again, thank you for the question. I would point out that there were no white Protestants by birth in the 25 cabinet members under Joe Biden.
How about in the ranks of American presidents throughout history, including now pretty well represented whites?
Senator.
And how about in the ranks of vice presidents during American history now? Whites pretty well represented in that group, right?
Senator, thank you again for the question.
Yeah. A cultural genocide, that's a stiff claim. And it's an interesting one because it's kind of a white victimhood argument. But if I remember my colleague, Senator Rosen, she was reading comments to you where you had been saying, man, Jews play the victim. Jews like to be the victim. And yet you're making a claim that whites are victimized by a cultural genocide when all the statistics would say, not just in history, but today, that whites are very well represented at every level of every institution.
Not just very well represented, Senator, they are overrepresented. Overrepresented. And to my dear brother, Senator Kaine, I appreciate you posing those questions. But you do prove that white privilege is alive and well by wearing glasses on your forehead while at work and asking serious questions. And nobody makes an issue about it. Why? Because you're Senator Kaine, understand? All right, put it up full mass. All right, here we go. Let's get into the background. This is Jeremy Carl, political commentator, former DOI deputy secretary during Trump's first term. Trump is resurrecting all the races. Let me give you some of his troubling past. Sometime before his nomination, Carl deleted at least 5,000 tweets. Now, this is important because usually there are companies that do this for individuals like him. So he has 5,000 tweets deleted from his X account. In a post from May 2023, Carl claimed the Capitol riot defendants had it worse than Black Americans in the Jim Crow South. A week later, Carl further escalated his rhetoric, writing that, quote, if the U.S. were a serious nation, American Federation of Teachers president would be, quote, tried for crimes against America's children and would get the death penalty. Now, he's silent on the Epstein situation and child sex predators. It has nothing to say about that. More recovered tweets. Quote, I'm sure George Floyd is looking up from hell right now and he is so proud of America, with red hearts. Another quote, I would rather be a Black man on trial for the assault of a white man in the 1930s. I'm sorry, you got to laugh not to. He says, I would rather be on trial. I'd rather be a Black man on trial for the assault of a white man in 1930s rural Mississippi than I would rather be a right winger in DC today on trial for political crimes. Can we put his picture back up? I mean, the irony is he probably believes this. He said he'd rather be a Black man on trial for the assault of a white man in the 1930s in rural Mississippi than be a right winger in DC today on trial for political crimes. He goes on to say the great replacement is real and they're going to try to make you pay for it. Luckily, it doesn't seem like he will be confirmed, thankfully. Utah Senator John Curtis will be the Republican vote that will probably sink his nomination. It shouldn't even be close, by the way. Quote, after reviewing his record and participating in today's hearing, I do not believe that Jeremy Carl is the right person to represent our nation's best interests in international forums. And I find his anti-Israel views and insensitive remarks about Jewish people unbecoming of the position for which he has been nominated, Curtis said. But yeah, I got it, Curtis. What about what he said about Black people, Curtis? Damn, Curtis. I get it. But he said way worse things about Black folk. Curtis knows he can't use that for his conservative friends on the aisle.